We like to talk about Bitcoin as savings technology, Bitcoin as digital gold, and that's great for people who have savings and who are saving. And when you look at, 60% of Americans unable to come up with $1,000 in emergency savings, you actually quickly even see that the problem is not even people can't save in Bitcoin. It's that people have no capacity to save at all. If we could solve that, that's a huge problem. Hey, what if we created a way for people to passively build a position in Bitcoin, savings in Bitcoin through what they do every day? Instead of airline miles, let's do Bitcoin, which is something we had been observing in Starbucks locations, watching people use our product, watching people use the credit card. We're like, how do we make this better? It was right in front of us. Essentially, every POS system in the world could become essentially a Bitcoin miner, generating Bitcoin for people every time they swipe a card.
Welcome back to Bitcoin Season 2. I'm Charlie Spears with Blockspace Media. Today, I've got Will Reeves, CEO of Fold app. And by the time this airs, I think Fold will have gone public on the Nasdaq, I believe. So congratulations to the Fold team. But before that, I want to shout out our sponsor, Arch Network. We'll hear more about them later. And welcome all the new CoinDesk listeners. Thanks. If you stumbled upon this show, don't stop. Make sure you listen to the whole thing. This is Bitcoin Season 2. What is Bitcoin Season 2? We're figuring it out as we go. We talk about new things on Bitcoin, the new era of user adoption. I will talk about ordinals, Bitcoin technical discussion, high-level, surface-level cultural stuff, Bitcoin layer 2s. So make sure you stick with us. Subscribe to all of our various channels. You can stream this anywhere, but if you're listening on CoinDesk, stay there. We talk about new things and new conversations on the oldest blockchain. So I'm going to bring up Will Reeves. Will, welcome to Bitcoin Season 2.
It's good to be here, Charlie.
So I actually think I've been using your app for like closing in on half a decade now. I mean, I'm look back at like my user history. It's like maybe sometimes multiple times a week for like closing on 4 years now. This is crazy. You've been building this for a long time.
We've been building, certainly. Sometimes moments like that, context is a little shocking to hear how long we've been at it. And like you said, there's been all the eras have been so distinct from, early Fold days. Bitcoin was different. The community was different too. Now it's been a wild ride.
We'll get into this. I'll talk you through the evolution. I'll have you give me the evolution of Fold, but let's just like drop right into your life as the CEO of a company imminently going public. I believe it's on Wednesday. It's on the Nasdaq, right? And like, what does your week look like last week, and what does this coming week look like for you?
Well, I'd have to say the listing part is probably going to be the least intense part of the experience so far. The most has really been, the last 9-12 months, which has been, really, setting a vision and finding the right people to make it happen and somehow end up on the other side and you're there. But the amount of work that went into it that was totally on top of just operating the business as we've had, since we've done for over half a decade. This had added an entire new layer, new players, new challenges. And, it's really been one of those times that, I'm reminded, in my role, it really changes deeply every 6 to 9 months in my experience, where what I need to do, what I'm putting my time into, who am I talking to, just completely changes. And so I'm going to have a little bit of a sigh of relief on Wednesday. Because it represents a monumental amount of work that the team's gone through.
Let me tell you about one of the most slept on opportunities in crypto. Arch is building fast, composable DeFi apps on Bitcoin. Arch apps tap into the OG blockchain with by far the most liquidity and best brand in crypto. I've known the team for over a year. The tech they're building is solid, and they are racing towards mainnet. There's dexes like Saturn, meme coins on funkybit.fun, instant loans on Cha-Ching, and so much more. Plus, they're rewarding testnet users, so join me in trying out Arch while it's still early. Yeah, it's kind of like all the work happens before you get to go either ring the bell on Wednesday morning or just sit at your computer and watch it launch on Wednesday. So let's roll the clock back. You say Fold's been around for half a decade. I'm not exactly sure when, but like let's talk through the evolution of Fold, because people forget how long half a decade is in crypto. Narratives last sometimes days, and you will have entire foundational assumptions of our entire industry change multiple times in a year. What does the idea and like Fold 1.0 look like back in the day?
Well, I think the first time that I met with my co-founder Matt Luongo, we were working outside, not on Bitcoin, but we were kind of partners on a project at a large tech company, and in that stage, Matt had shown me what he had been building on the side, and essentially allowed people to exchange a gift card for Bitcoin. And it was this really clever way of allowing people who received a $10 Starbucks card from their grandmother over Christmas to flip that into Bitcoin. And while that was interesting to me, the most interesting thing was, hey, you can build in Bitcoin. You can there's business models and demand and opportunity here that I had always been interested in Bitcoin as a project and as a movement, but to have that in my background being, as an entrepreneur and kind of product guy, it really changed. I mean, it absolutely changed my life in a huge way. And like you say, what you learn is you're not just here building trying to find product market fit and build value, deliver something. But at the same time, those fundamental assumptions of what you're working on itself are changing. And you'll see that Fold's kind of history and evolution reflects a lot of that underlying change that was going on. And so that first iteration was, hey, how can you turn a gift card into Bitcoin? From there, what we saw was, hey, there's actually a lot of people living on Bitcoin because they are miners or they're being paid in Bitcoin in the early days off of BitPay. Those people need to unlock that Bitcoin to go about their daily life. This is before even digital gold had fully totally cemented. And so it was a lot more open, the possibilities where Bitcoin could be. And so we focused on, hey, let's use actually a gift card as a means of transferring Bitcoin and allowing you to go buy groceries, pay bills, all of those things. And that did well. We definitely had great uptick when price was up. When price was down, our numbers would just absolutely collapse. It wasn't a sustainable thing. And the group of people wasn't large enough. The amount of people who had Bitcoin and then had it with the intent to live on it was a very small segment of people. And so we looked at this and said, this is not solving the biggest problem in front of us. It's, making Bitcoin feel real as money that can be used is great. And a lot of people, some of their first interactions with Bitcoin, they still say to me this day, was using Fold allowed me to understand Bitcoin because I could actually use it in my life. Right. And from there, we not only ran up against some pretty significant user experience challenges. This is before Lightning. This is, waiting 10 minutes to buy a cup of coffee, paying a transaction fee, not being rewarded, debiting out of your Bitcoin to create a taxable event, not on credit, is just a fundamentally worse user experience than what's available out there. And so we did our best to work on that. We were very early to Lightning. We were the first to add rewards natively to Lightning as well, so that when you're spending on Lightning, you can earn Bitcoin. I think we solved most of those major challenges except the taxation part.
I mean, I think you did. I mean, I was the user. I used all those features and you did them very well. I don't want to shield the company too much, but I remember the early, I think it was 21, maybe early 22 of Fold. And I was like, this is a very good app. You have some intractable UX challenges about Bitcoin itself or the friction of the existing regulatory landscape, but you guys delivered a really cool product. And I was I'm a huge fan of that. But that was Fold 1.0, and you're looking at the landscape and evolving like market, and you have to figure out what Fold, I'm going to say Fold 2.0 looks like. It's the same company, but like what, when did this like decision, or what were the like key decisions in this process? What were they, and when did you like make them?
Well, number one, it was, hey, if we're going to build something, we got to be solving a very big challenge, and we have to be sure about what the right challenge is. And we thought we had one idea of it. Hey, if you just make Bitcoin feel like money or swiping a credit card, you can get there. That's a big thing to do. But I'd say it was kind of a little bit out of order, because we looked at our audience and said, well, it's a pretty small group of people. The problem is not being easily able to spend Bitcoin at a retailer. The problem is not enough people have Bitcoin. And then you look at that issue, and there's a couple things there. There's an education bit, but there's also the fact of, we like to talk about Bitcoin is savings technology. Bitcoin is digital gold. And that's great for people who have savings and who are saving. And when you look at, 60% of Americans unable to come up with $1,000 in emergency savings, you actually quickly even see that the problem is not even people can't save in Bitcoin. It's that people have no capacity to save at all. There is nothing that they're producing that gets to be saved. And so we looked at that issue and said, if we could solve that, that's a huge problem. Number one, making savings and the ability to grow savings long term is an incredible thing to bring to people. But the second thing is, hey, we can use Bitcoin as a means. We believe Bitcoin is a savings technology in a way that can actually deliver on this promise. But we have this issue of people still don't have enough money for savings. And so what we did was say, hey, what if we created a way for people to passively build a position in Bitcoin, a savings in Bitcoin through what they do every day? Instead of airline miles, let's do Bitcoin. And it was really that click, which is something we had been observing in Starbucks locations, watching people use our product, watching people use a credit card. We're like, how do we make this better? It was right in front of us. Essentially, every POS system in the world could become essentially a Bitcoin miner generating Bitcoin for people every time they swipe a card. And that little click was much bigger audience, the right order of problems to solve. And we did an MVP, launched it at, I think it was the Bitcoin conference in San Francisco in 2019, and it just took off. And that was when you're like, okay, we found the right direction.
So, I don't know how much you want to focus on these, but I do want to kind of reflect on, me as a longtime, I would say, Fold Power user. I got to experience all of the features, the ones that really worked and some of the ones that didn't work. And I want to invite you to share some of the product's features that you have built over the years that didn't work. One of my favorite ones was actually kind of a really fun idea, was the metaverse AR thing that you guys did back in the day. It was actually kind of a cool idea, but it's also indicative of that little snapshot and window in like the crypto narrative. But I don't know, what are your reflections on like the iterating on these different product features?
So I think Fold has always done things differently in terms of bringing products to market. We've always really tried to create clever ways, engaging ways that get people thinking about Bitcoin every day in new ways that are more personal, that are more real. Because what we found is, number one, if you can give people Bitcoin, they start to care about it more. And second, if you can get people to think about Bitcoin for long periods of time, they start to, the process is much more accelerated from them to go to learning about it to actually, doing something about it. And so Fold, I think we launched one of the first types of these products these features was like our daily wheel. You could come in and get a little bit of sats every single day. And this was, very successful to the product and getting people thinking about Bitcoin and Fold every single day, building a little bit, looking back in 2 years saying, oh my God, it's grown, X%. And it's, my spins are worth more than I was saving on that weekly basis in that time. And so we looked and really encouraged the team to think about interesting, creative ways to bring Bitcoin to the world. And we had one of our developers who dabbled in AR and all of this stuff, kind of brought this and said, I have a prototype. And so we looked at it and said, hell yes, let's make Bitcoin feel real. Let's give it like an actual heft in the physical world, and launched it. And, it was definitely one that I think a lot of our core, some of our core audience really loved, but it didn't deliver on this kind of larger ability to bring in normies. And part of that process is you can't just create a gimmick to bring in someone to Bitcoin. Like, it really is a process that takes time and has to be done well. And so I think it was a great example of the creativity, fun that Fold likes to bring to Bitcoin, but also one that, hey, that didn't work. So we, sunsetted that and moved on to the next.
Hey, this is Will with Blockspace Media. And I don't know if you heard, but we just announced the second edition of our conference series, OpNext, now to be held at the MicroStrategy HQ in Tysons, Virginia.
That's right. After the success of our first scaling conference at Fidelity last fall, we're doing it again this spring, April 11th and 12th at the MicroStrategy HQ. I'm really excited for the programming. We have various stakeholders, industry, developers, and Bitcoin miners present.
So join us in April for open, neutral, and honest conversation about the leading proposals and technical solutions that will scale Bitcoin to the next billion users. No booths, no tokens, no shills, just Bitcoin and honest conversation.
You can find tickets and more information at opnext.dev or click below in the show notes.
And the wheel did work. Like I'm one of those people who just absolutely abhors like having to open up the app, click the button. But some of the other people's lizard brains just love that stuff. And what's funny is I would consider my daily user flow. I still open up the wheel in 2025. I still spin it. I think it worked. I think this is one of the most interesting, compelling, like I would say now, iconic product features in any app in Bitcoin right now. So
we found, I think when I realized how powerful it was, is, I think from a typical customer standpoint is hearing what it does with families. So kids love it and parents love it. And Fold's audience and demographic is a lot of young families. And so it kind of created this family ritual around Bitcoin every single day. And it was so much so that when we actually made a change to the wheel where you'd get less ability to spin essentially, and it was very unpopular. It almost broke families apart because, a family of 4 kids, they, used to be able to have, one each would do it. And that was amazing to hear. And then also, there are actual billionaires who spin the wheel and earn 5 sats a day. And so whatever that psychology is, it tapped into it. And I think it's equal parts lizard brain and equal parts kind of community in a sense. And it truly worked. And again, that was launched very similar to the AR experience where someone had an idea. Hey, let's ship it and see. And, some work very well. Others, you move on.
Yeah, it's really funny because it's one of the, right now, a lot of the crypto discourse is like, are we all just gambling all the time? And I would say, well, the answer is probably yes. But this is like one of those features which is like, well, we can tap into that base level human instinct and actually make it a productive product feature. So that brings us to today. And I am not really that familiar with the world of traditional finance or like modern public markets. So maybe like, and I really haven't focused on like the public side of Bitcoin on this podcast very much. So maybe handhold me a bit. What's behind the decision to go public? What does this mean? What does this unlock?
So one of the benefits and perspective that you develop building a Bitcoin business for as long as we have as a team is how important taking full advantage of Bitcoin cycles is. You live and die by the bull and bear market, and learning how to operate a business with that being a reality that has to be contended against is, it will decide how successful you can be, because your growth in the bull cycles is 100x. The depth of the bear cycles is zero investment is around. New users entering the space is negative. In fact, it's actually antagonistic in many ways from the outside. And the cycles have definitely changed. They kind of more have rhymed over the years, and so there's always, it's not something you fully count on being the same in every way, but they feel the same. And knowing how to take advantage of the upswings and manage the downswings is as a builder in Bitcoin is one of the most important skill sets you can create. And for us last cycle, we looked ahead and saw that we were really at the cusp of a breakout of Bitcoin into the mainstream. Fold being a company that integrates Bitcoin into rewards, into your base financial products to make them better, to work for you, to build wealth and long-term savings. Bitcoin was very rapidly going to be represented in everybody's financial portfolio. And we saw that. And for us, we wanted to make sure that we were able to take full advantage of that. And one of the ways that we saw was there was not a Bitcoin financial services company represented in public markets, uniquely focused on Bitcoin as a savings asset, not a speculative platform, not listing every token under the sun. But what is a Bitcoin company and that vision that it can bring to public markets with a very clear focus on building savings? And with that would bring us access to capital to accelerate M&A. It would allow us to continue to build our Bitcoin treasury position, which historically for us has always just been a thing because we receive revenues native in Bitcoin. We know that we need to survive bear markets. So for us, building a Bitcoin treasury has always been important. But now there's this whole new dynamic that has developed with the likes of the leveraged Bitcoin equities and MicroStrategy. There's other benefits that come with it. And so public markets really gave us a way to tell our story on a much bigger stage with access to more capital so that we could essentially create the largest sale to capture this cycle that I think we're really just embarking on.
So I've given you some layups, but I'm going to throw a challenging question to you here, which is you bring up the landscape of public markets, and there's a lot of public Bitcoin mining companies out there. We cover them on our mining podcast. But now there are also a increasingly numbered landscape of crypto companies. Coinbase, the behemoth, I think Kraken may intend to go public. But you have like Exodus Wallet, another, I think, sleeper one out there. How does Fold fit into this increasingly diverse corporate landscape in the broader crypto asset space?
Yeah, I think it's really, for Fold, has always been about keeping our focus and going deeper on the things that are being overlooked. And for us, that has been focusing on building long-term savings through Bitcoin for our customers. And starting from that premise of we are intending to help you build savings, we are going to build the products and tools around that to build that. And we are not going to participate in some of the other noise that may not be in service of that. Because I think in many ways you could hear you can buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, and we think that is great. But when you look at the focus, what is being built at some of those other platforms, there is really not a focus on building long-term savings in a way that I think Fold has been able to go deeper, farther, and faster. And we end up in a totally different spot. We end up with customers whose savings accounts have outpaced that of their peers at traditional banks by over 60%. We've given away $70 million in Bitcoin rewards. If they had done that at a competitor, it would be just under 20 million. So it's actually working. If you actually focus and build a platform that's really focused on savings and building that, removing the noise, you can take customers very far and transform their financial life. And what does that mean for Fold? It means our customers' wealth and savings is outpacing that of their peers. We have some of the most valuable customers out there, and all of them are increasing their wealth over time. So for us, when we look at, on the other side, we see a million things going on. We see a primary focus on speculation. Brian Armstrong himself came out, with the new administration that was here, and it's his time to say what's most important. And he says, what's most important is we need to be able to list more tokens more easily. And I think that just reflects just a very different vision and very different focus than what we have been building at Fold, heads down very quietly, but has had tremendous results on the lives of our customers. And continuing to build into what tools they need once they have a down payment worth of Bitcoin that they've earned in rewards, or all of these services are going to be required, and you need to have focus to be able to deliver on them without falling into the traps that are associated with some of the other use cases, which in my opinion, I think are great. Speculation is fine. It's going to happen. It's going to be here. And it clearly has built an incredible business for them. It's just not our business.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably come back to this more existential question of like what business models might exist in a Bitcoinized future. I think this one a lot of us Bitcoiners don't. We kind of hand wave a little bit. But let's, you mentioned you've been able to have a Bitcoin treasury, which is interesting that you say that you've kind of always had a Bitcoin treasury, because I think about as a operating a mining business myself for many years, like, yeah, your revenues are in Bitcoin. It's weird to think of having a Bitcoin treasury. It's always been a mentality of, well, what's the optimal way to handle this from a business operations standpoint? But I was looking at you guys on like Bitcoin treasuries, 1,000 Bitcoin in your treasury. That puts you like top 25 or so largest treasuries. That's a lot. I feel that the topic of Bitcoin treasuries is a bit like that horse may be almost beaten to death. But I'm like wondering if you have any like interesting, unique perspectives for the average CoinDesk listener that they may have not heard before, or maybe it's some insight into some of the weird like gears that power even constructing a Bitcoin treasury.
I think it started off very much from the kind of perspective you said. Our customers are sending us Bitcoin to access goods and services. We are here because we believe Bitcoin is an asset that you want to be part of its monetization. It gives you an incredible way to build savings. Of course, Fold is going to have a Bitcoin treasury. It just was something that was obvious. Now, that was before it was being spoken of a way to get a multiple on public markets and all of these things. For us, it was, hey, sustainability, durability, and our native payment rail was Bitcoin. It just made sense, and it delivered for Fold. Having built a treasury and holding in Bitcoin, definitely was able to deliver in times when Fold, as a public company, needed that support. And so we have seen firsthand the value of building that over time and helping you soften out those very violent cycles that Bitcoin can go through when you're structuring your treasury in a way that's taking care of your short-term needs, and at the same time is going to be built out and help flatten out some of those ebbs and flows. And so for us, it was really simple like that. It wasn't very complicated. Now we saw the rise of MicroStrategy and all the other leveraged Bitcoin equities, and we see a whole new aspect of how to look at a treasury. But those weren't the reasons why we started to. And so for Fold, it's always been first about durability, sustainability. But as we looked to become a public company, said, hey, there's actually an interesting dynamic here. In the market today, there's three general categories. There's the crypto platforms. They're doing their speculation. They're casinos in the sky. That's great. There's the miners. Fold, you can think of kind of like a miner, except we do not have any of the overhead costs or capital outlay that miners have. We are not focused on the remaining 5-6% of Bitcoin that's left. We're focused on the 94% of Bitcoin that's already here. We're like a perfect miner in many ways. So you can kind of think about us like that without some of the hardships of operating a mining business, as you know. And then you have the Bitcoin equities, and we have a treasury. And so we will probably benefit from the dynamics that are there. So we kind of sit in our kind of own lane, but have kind of naturally over our history of the company, kind of drawn a parallel to all three. And as a public company, it's going to open up a lot more doors as a result of kind of touching. But it's also incumbent on us to tell our story and why we are different.
So this brings us to the next era of Bitcoin user. And I think you've said you're trying to focus on this, these themes, these beats, these products to the new user. But it is interesting because I think about like a lot of the Bitcoin discourse, maybe 2020, like the COVID era to today. It's been very, very focused on Bitcoin being a hard money and savings technology. This I agree with. But I look at the new type of user being onboarded into the Bitcoin ecosystem, and they look very different than the class of, I call it the COVID class of 2020. These are people who got into it probably for ideological reasons. A lot of the Austrian economics, red pilling to whatever other narrative. But now, like the top of funnel is are more like the less ideologically driven user. They come in through MicroStrategy or a Bitcoin ETF or like portfolio allocation, or it's almost like more hands-off kind of, you might even say like boomers, but maybe as millennials like myself transition to more of a boomer approach to our own money. How do you design, this might be too much of a layup, but like what's the balance of like how close do you put that user to the actual UI UX, to the actual Bitcoin chain itself? And how do you navigate the reality that crypto UX is still pretty like confusing for most people?
Yeah, well, our focus has always been, hey, let's take tools that people have used for decades and let's integrate Bitcoin in a way that makes them just fundamentally better. And I think you make a great point of how the top of funnel looks way different. I think in this past week, there were two things that came through on my timeline that were just really very representative of this. You had one of the MicroStrategy Irresponsibly Long members who comes out that they've never sent or held Bitcoin before in any self-custodial way. And it was shocking to me because
I was shocked by that too. I was like, what do you, why are you like the face of this movement? Okay. Anyway, I'll have them on.
Just absolute conviction. Yeah. But underneath it, you're like, wait, you're missing something, right?
Yeah.
And, then at the same time, I think the other day we had,
it was Plan B saying he was, he
swapped into the ETF. And, it was such a moment because it reflects just a disjuncture for where the type of person that was coming into Bitcoin, the reasons why they were, to this other phase where really it is Bitcoin is settling in at a much higher level and mainstream understanding, and it is not settling down in the sound money versus fiat economics, Jekyll Island, like all of that's not where it's settling. It's settling at a mania at a much higher level that's accessible through brokerage accounts. So you're seeing this major flip, and the customers are going to be different too. And that's something that we can opine on why and what does that mean for the future. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is a process that nearly every single movement of any success goes through. You have the early majority coming in that's ideologically driven, that then creates the groundswell, the momentum that those are able that those come to then monetize that kind of fervor and then on top of that, you're creating all these products and services that are normal people can just roll right in and they get the benefit that was being extolled by this early majority, but they might not even know how to talk about it. And so for us, we have seen this funnel change. I think it's going to very much change. Where are people buying Bitcoin? It's undoubtedly right now coming through the ETFs or exposure through MicroStrategy and the other equities. That's not going to stop. But for Fold, we look at, hey, it's actually in Fold's best interest, to have our customers actually hold Bitcoin, actually be closer to the protocol and on chain for a couple reasons. If we're not able to do that, Fold is, it's hard to monetize an ETF when you're not BlackRock and when you're not already in the brokerage. So to some extent, creating a financial ecosystem that is closer to on-chain is really the opportunity that Fold has, is to build in parallel and kind of beside a separate pathway. And so what we've focused on is what are the products and services that are going to speak to this new crop of, Bitcoin saver or Bitcoin. And for us, we just launched last week our Bitcoin Rewards credit card, which is the number one requested product at Fold for the last few years. And it's an incredible pair to the explosion of brokerage and retirement investors to put alongside of their ETF investment. But the cool part is these people are going to be earning actual Bitcoin that they can withdraw, self-custody. And so it creates an interesting angle for us to keep them close to it, expose them to a much deeper level and ability to move into the Bitcoin ecosystem than what they're ever going to get from their ETF.
That was a very, very interesting answer. You got me thinking. I might throw a bit of a curveball question to you, which is, so you guys are focused on your product, and the top of funnel is this new type of user, MicroStrategy, leverage equities, ETFs, TradFi. But this past 2 weeks, the mempool Bitcoin transaction activity has been near back at an all-time low, especially after we had 2 years of frenzied activity. I covered all of that through all of this show and other stuff that I've written. But we're back down to the actual Bitcoin transaction activity on chain near zero again. What are your thoughts on this? I'll invite you to opine. You said you didn't were going to. I invite you to opine on this. And what are your personal thoughts on how we as Bitcoiners should navigate this information?
I mean, Bitcoin is about the freest market you could possibly participate in. And so the first order of business is it is what it is. Like what we are seeing is, we are not having, no one's being subsidized. We don't have incentive programs. And you can know when those happen, because when we have these major spikes that you were talking about on the, ordinals or some of these other things, those clearly are essentially outside capital coming in, bursting in, but not sustainable. And we've talked about Lightning. We've talked about all of these things. Like what is the demand that's going to keep it a solid pressure? And I think that example is so perfect actually to pair with the other two things that we just spoke about, of it's such a great microcosm of where we're at today. And I think, I am not, calling that the sky is falling on this. To me, it feels very natural, and Bitcoin's always, these transaction flows always been an ebb and a flow in and out. And we're seeing breathing right now. But when we're seeing that, we're saying, wait, where are all these use cases that were hitting the chain that we said were here? And everyone can point at everybody. It's the Spider-Man meme. It's like, well, you said Lightning was going to do this, and you said ordinals were going to do this, and yet we're still here. And so I think in 6 months we're gonna be talking about congestion in the mempool again, and what that means and why that's so bullish or why that's so bearish. But it does feel quiet, and it feels quiet at a time when the market is not bearish. The products and services that have been spoken about over the last 5-6 years have matured and are growing up, and we're still here. So the fact that it is this quiet still, for me, remains to be seen, of where are the businesses? Where is the activity happening?
I know. I just kind of sit here, and my goal is I think you and me both, we anticipate there's going to be more stuff. It's almost impossible to predict what it is. We can almost just react to it, but remain bullish on Bitcoin, which leads me to wrap this up. Let's turn it back to Fold. Where does Fold go from here? What is how do you see Fold growing over the next year in 2025?
I think Fold has the opportunity to create a household kind of financial services name built on Bitcoin and bringing Bitcoin to mainstream audiences, those that need it most. And it's just, for us, what does that actually look like in practice? It means that Fold has dethroned the airline mile industry in favor of Bitcoin rewards. It means that Fold's card, just like the airline miles card, is doing 1% of GDP. It means that every savings account on Fold and outside has a dial that you can dial up your percentage of net worth in Bitcoin or dial down, balance between fiat and Bitcoin. It means that you can actually, when you have your Bitcoin, that you're going to be able to access all the life milestones that everyone else does in traditional accounts, home ownership, building out your family. And even with the reversal of SAB 121, we're not going to see them coming in any meaningful way for a long time. They are going to be in strategy mode. What do we do? And even when they figure that out, that's a very different thing than actually doing it. And Fold, I believe, has an incredible opportunity over the next 2 to 3 years to take advantage of where Bitcoin is in the kind of social conscious these days, as well as its track record that it brings to the table and where the product is that I think Fold will become a household name that brings Bitcoin to kind of overthrow a lot of these old traditional cultural structures that don't exist, aren't good for people anymore, and ultimately is replacing it with something that I think truly improves people's lives.
Great. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like at the end of it, I have to disclose that I'm not an investor in Fold. I don't own any Fold because I can't. But by the time this podcast comes out, I may own a share of Fold because it will have IPO by then. Fingers crossed. Will, final thoughts as we wrap up?
I'd say, let's see this. I love what you all at Blockspace Media have been doing with Bitcoin Season 2. I think one of the things that we went through is what Bitcoin should be or shouldn't be for a long time, and getting very upset about that. And at the end of the day, what I think we're all here for is we are operating in the world's freest market, and this is what it looks like. And I don't think that anybody has really covered that in many ways. It's like, no, this is what Bitcoin is. And this is the only way we talk about it. I think you guys have done an incredible job about expanding the conversation in a way that reflects what is actually going on here. You can just do things, as they say.
You can just do things.
And there's a lot going on. And I appreciate that perspective that you all brought on. And like you said, as fast as Bitcoin Season 2 happened, the brokerages and the vests started coming in, and the tent is just getting far bigger than the center can hold. The center cannot hold anymore. And so I think it's going to be a really interesting thing, but I appreciate you guys being a voice for, a more expansive understanding of Bitcoin.
Appreciate that, Will. And I'll maybe we'll run it back a year from now, reflect on 2025 and how Fold did. So thank you very much. And I will see you on chain.